Jen and I have been discussing and contemplating this concept of how everybody mistakenly believes that everything in our world happens despite us, rather than the truth where everything out there, everything in our world actually happens because of us. And let's start off with an example. So the best example that we can share is maybe just briefly exploring Jen and my journey as we've progressed from where we were absolutely captured in that mind matrix prison. The reason we can't escape from this prison is because the prison isn't something out there. We are the prison. And so what did we do with the prison is we try to make it look pretty. We bought cars. We try to live in the fanciest houses. An artificial world, because we didn't love the prison, but as we were stuck in it and we didn't really know what it was, we were trapped. That's because we mistakenly believed as well that everything out there happens despite us. In other words, it's a world that we have absolutely no power over changing. But then we started to become more aware, and we started to ask the question, does everything out there happen despite us? Or hang on a second, is it possible that everything out there, specifically, before we look at the consensus mind, or before we look at the perceptive collective consciousness and how that affects, or should we rather say co-creates our reality, let's explore the individual first. And so many years ago, Jen and I started to think about, okay, so this world that we're inhabiting, this prison, we didn't think of it as a prison at the time, but it wasn't a world that we loved. It wasn't a world of our liking. So had it been, or should we rather say, and I just want you to keep this, because once you can internalize and you can actually see this construct that the world is not unchangeable, the world is not something that's happening out there and you've just got to, as this meat suit, just fit in and do what it dictates, but rather that you are empowered to change your own circumstances, that you can change things. And let's start exploring it, right? So couple of years back, Jen and I decided we were really in the matrix. We had decided we were immigrating, and we were going to go. We're permanent residents of Panama, and we were going to go and live in Panama. But that wasn't the right construct for us. Our energy needed to be somewhere else, and so we moved into one of those stack 'em and pack 'em places and lived the life. We were really starting. Our awakening had begun. But this is what the revelation was as long as we believed that the world out there was unchangeable, well, then what do? We just stay in the rat race. We keep doing what we've always done, maybe do a little bit better, try to earn more money, all the illusions, all the absolute illusions around the mind matrix prison. So we made a decision, and we decided, how do we shift? How do we move away from being trapped? And that's where we started to realize that our world out there doesn't happen despite us. It happens because of us. I'm talking our individual world. And then we asked the next question. Okay, so if our world out there is indeed a product of what we're doing, what is it? How can we communicate? How can we engage with it? How can we begin to make those shifts? And that's when we realized that it was the thoughts we thought, the beliefs we held on to so strongly, and the choices that we made were what was manifesting or creating the world that we lived in, the world that we didn't love. But as we started to shift our thinking, it shifted our beliefs, helped along by the courses, the spiritual courses and things that we'd attended. gradually we started making different choices. And those different choices were, well, we didn't want to be in that stack 'em and pack 'em. We no longer wanted to or needed to immigrate to Panama, because that was a very fear-based move. It was based on what we believed the deteriorating situation in South Africa was. So based on that deteriorating situation, we felt we had to leave. We had to go somewhere better. But that was all fear-based. As soon as we started shifting our thinking and our beliefs and our choices, we realized that there's nothing to fear but fear itself. We did one of the most dangerous things in South Africa. We moved from a safe stack 'em and pack 'em enclosed area where there were security guards patrolling, etc., to a small holding. Now, had we still believed in the fear, we would never have made that move. So this is, like I said, we as an individual consciousness, and I'm sure you're certain of that, we can change our personal circumstances by changing our thoughts, changing our beliefs, shifting our beliefs, and those beliefs will then help us to make different choices. So on an individual level, we can do that as well. But we can certainly do it on a collective basis too. Let me give an example, an analogy, which might help your thinking in this regard, right? So imagine a movie camera, like the movie cameras when you're in a cinema, right? And a movie camera, not now, I mean, now it's all digital. I'm talking about the days when we still had a film in those movie cameras. Back then, the light shining through, right? So there's a light shining through. Let's just call that the projection of your consciousness, right? So the light shining through the cameras is the projection of your consciousness, and the film that's in the camera is the thoughts, the beliefs, and the choices that you make in life, right? So you've got your consciousness shining through this film, and projected onto the screen is a set of circumstances, an environment, what your life is like. So as you shift, as you consciously choose to shift your thoughts, shift your beliefs, make better choices, you replace the film, or the film gradually gets replaced or is replaced, and a different environment projects. And that's exactly now what I'm talking about. Is imagine now you've got this single camera, that camera, that film, that projected reality onto the screen comes from your individual. Imagine now the reality that we live is a combination of billions of different projectors, right? So all of our projectors collectively create this reality that we live in. So imagine now when enough of us start accepting that our world doesn't happen despite us, our world happens because of us. Now imagine when all of us keep shifting, changing our beliefs, changing our thinking, changing the choices that we make. Imagine now when enough of those projected realities shift sufficiently, and that's how New Earth arrives through you, is by shifting your beliefs, by shifting the choices that you make. Change your thinking, and on a collective level, when enough people, in other words, when a critical mass of the consensus mind shifts their thinking sufficiently, the world as we see it is going to shift. We're going to shift away from war, famine, lack, because that thinking, those beliefs resulted, or should we rather say, are a result of the absolute control that the globalist banksters have had over the flow of information. Because remember, by creating the circumstances where everybody lives in a bubble of debt, they're so busy, the people are so busy doing to survive, that they haven't got time to go and explore and research and find out what the truth is. In fact, the first thing you got to do is you're not going to try and escape from something unless you know you're in it. In other words, unless you know that this is a prison, that you are in a prison. In other words, this physical being, this mask, this disguise, this character that you're playing, right? That is the prison. And until you realize that is the prison, you're going to remain stuck in that prison. So in order to escape, what do you got to do? Well, you've got to begin by making some conscious shifts. But I hear you saying, okay, so if I've got to make these conscious shifts, what about my program? Because we all are programmed. And we've been doing this for years, and I can promise you, I still, on a regular basis, there's things pop into my mind, and I kind of start spiraling. I start spiraling towards fear. How do you stop it? Well, one of the best ways that I found to stop it is physically actually imagine in your mind, imagine that you're like a traffic officer, and you physically, you don't just go stop, you go stop. And unbelievably, amazingly, those negative thoughts, those thoughts that are kind of spiraling you towards fear or possibly spiraling you towards anger, when you physically demonstrate it, and I mean literally verbalize it, say it aloud, put up both those hands, it's amazing how those thoughts start to dissipate. Because remember, what you focus on manifests. Another great tool is habits. 95% of what you do every single day is habitual. It's based on your programming. So if you keep repeating that 95% of thinking, you think the same thoughts, 95% of the thoughts you think are the same. 95% of the actions you take are the same. 95% of the choices you take are the same. If you continue the habits, in other words, you continue to allow the programming to dictate, very little is going to change. How do we change the programming? First of all, stop the negativity before it even gets. Stop the fear, stop the anger, stop the anxiety as quickly as you can. Physically do that. But then we need to shift the habits, that 95% of what we do every day, that programming, those habits. How do we introduce new habits? Well, to introduce new habits, we first of all got to use that gift of imagination. Use that gift of imagination to picture the most amazing picture of possibility in the future. We're talking in the third density now, right? What do you want to have, do, and be? Create that beautiful picture of possibility, because remember, nothing happens despite you. Your environment's not created despite you. It's created because of you. But when you change and you have that vivid picture of possibility in the future, use all your senses. How's it going to feel? What's it going to look like? What are you going to hear? Right? Use all of your senses. Picture that in the future. There's nothing to learn. There's nothing to acquire. Everything is within us. Nothing is outside of you. Everything is within. Let's say, for example, you're in the habit, and most people are, in the habit of arriving home and they just fall down in the chair and they watch TV all night, right? So you want to replace it. Maybe what you want to replace that bad habit with is you want to replace that with reading educational material or reading spiritual material. So how would you do that, right? What you would do is, it's just so easy to get down, fall into the chair, use the remote, switch on the TV. Well, what would you do? You take the batteries out of the remote, you put it in a cupboard on one side of the house, and you take the remote and put it in the cupboard on the other side. So you make performing that habit as difficult as possible. So what do? You leave the book right next to your chair. So as you arrive home, it's going to be easier, more convenient to reach over, grab the book and read it. Of course, it's going to take time. They say it takes about 90 days to replace a habit. So you've always got to think about replacing rather than eliminating a habit. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to replace that film, and we're looking to shift you personally first. Let's go back to the collective consciousness. Roll on to 2008. So comes 2008, yet again, look, I want to contrast 2001 and 2008 to 2020 and then the stuff that's happened since then, right? Just to also give you a warm, fuzzy feeling that, individually, people are waking up. Individually, people are starting to put new films, making better choices, etc., putting new films into their cameras, and things are really shifting. But let's look at 2008. So 2008, the financial crisis comes along, and one person goes to jail, right? Unbelievable. But what happened back then? So 2001, we all believed the lie. 2008 comes along, and the very people who've been raping humanity, stealing left, right, and center, committing fraud like you can't believe, the banks, get bailed out. Using what money? Well, it's money that was just printed. Remember, when money gets printed, what does that do? It's highly inflationary, right? What does inflation do? Steals more and more and more real wealth from humanity. Okay, so 2001, hoax worked. 2008, hoax worked. Come 2020, what happens in 2020? This nonsense where they'd use the flu season to create a non-existent pandemic, and everybody, well, not everybody, but a large proportion of humanity complies, and they wear masks and they stand 6 feet apart. They line up to go and get this jab, etc. Absolutely crazy. So in contrast, think about the progression. Yeah, by 2021, a lot of people were lining up for the jab. But what's so interesting this time round, doctors have stood up, a lot of brave people have stood up and actually said, hold on a second, this is nonsense. So that's a major shift happening already. Back to 2017, like I said, the good guys were watching the feed-forward loop that was coming from humanity, and they started to see that there was definitely a shift in the consensus mind. There was definitely a shift in the way that the group consciousness was looking at the world. And instead of coming out and blatantly just telling everybody, what did they do? They started that movement, the Q movement, where they started publishing messages and things on, I think it was 4chan first or 8chan first and then 4chan. And there was a group of really awake folks who were looking out there that started sifting through, started answering the questions. In other words, the way to shift thinking is not just, you don't just throw it at people, but you've got to allow people, you've got to drop those breadcrumbs and allow people to pick up those breadcrumbs. And that should be a lesson to all of us as well. Doing what Tucker Carlson does, I must say that's something I absolutely love about Tucker Carlson's approach. I mean, that man is well aware of what's going on. Instead of trying to do what I was doing, was taking people from this 3D thinking right past 4D, this kind of middle road, all the way over here. Way too much. People can't. The confirmation bias and the programming is so intense that it, in fact, what happened was, instead of helping in any way, I actually alienated a lot of people, right? So what we need to do to help these folks that are kind of just waking up is throw them a few breadcrumbs every now and again, just like that, just like the Q movement did. You know, when you do your own research, when you do your own digging, when you start to appreciate, hang on a second, something's amiss here, that confirmation bias goes. But if you try and overcome that confirmation bias too early by moving people too far over, think about the way Tucker Carlson does it. In fact, often when I chat to Jen, I go, I need to make this video like a Tucker Carlson version. Instead of trying to thrust people right over here, we need to bring them to a middle ground first, and then let them, in other words, throw them a few breadcrumbs and let the people themselves gradually move themselves, gradually change their thinking, gradually change those ingrained beliefs and those habits, right? Change them. Slowly but surely shift over so that they are going to be able to move themselves over. You can't, there's no way you can thrust them over. And in fact, that's the very reason that the good guys, the white hats, all the way back to 2001, didn't do what I tried to do when I initially sort of try to share this information. You know what it's like when you start finding out all of this information. You just want to share it to the people you love. You want the people you love to know it as well. But you've got to do it in a gentle way. You've got to appreciate that there is a confirmation bias going on. There is that programming, that in-depth programming, those habits that are going to really, if you pull them too far too quickly, is going to actually do way more damage. What can I do to shift my thinking, to shift my beliefs? And once I shift my beliefs and my habits, the choices that I'm going to start making are going to do what? They're going to put a new film in that camera, and the reality my reality, my truth that is projected out there is going to change completely. And once we can get enough people to start shifting, to take these actions, to consciously become aware of the fact, this is the most important crux of this whole video. Our world does not happen despite us. It's completely within our control to shift our world. And how do we do it? We got to start off by changing our habits. We got to start off by not just going through the motions every day and waking up every single day and thinking, how am I going to get through this day? And then you see your world has been in your way and you look out there at an unchangeable environment that you have no power of changing. You need to first of all shift that. And the biggest thing you've got to accept is my world happens because of me, not despite me. The more of us that can start doing this, all of us, as we can keep consistently changing that film, in other words, shifting our thinking, shifting our beliefs, shifting our choices, our world, once enough of us, once we reach that critical mass of enough people that have shifted their thinking, their beliefs, and their choices sufficiently, we're going to move. Our world is going to start changing, dramatically changing. And so that's why I consistently say, you don't arrive at New Earth. New Earth arrives through you. And you need to do the work on yourself. And once enough of us do that work, invest the time to shift away from our programming to become the person that we're waiting for, who's going to save our world, humanity's future, or should I rather say, the future of Terrans in this realm of duality is shifting dramatically into the fourth density. And once the collective perceptive consciousness is ready, into that fifth density realm of absolute peace, tranquility, and unconditional love.